Okay, open up Chapter 9 PowerPoint, Domestic United States and Global Logistics. And we're going to have a look at what is in this chapter. If you could go to slide 5 to start. Talk about what logistics means. You've heard that word probably in your personal life. And let me get this glare out of here. So in your personal life, that word means something like how we're going to get things done, all the pieces and parts of how we're going to make something happen. It's exactly what it means in business. So logistics is necessary to get goods to you from the supplier, to you as the manufacturer, and from the manufacturer then out to the buyer. So imagine if you went to a hotel and they said, we haven't gotten any shipments of sheets, so we can't make your bed. I mean, all those things have to happen in order to make things work in every kind of manufacturing or service business. It's to how to get the goods to the consumer at the end, or the customer, and how to get things that are in process. So if we go back kind of to our lunch example we've been having all semester, I'm going to get the baggie with the sandwich in it, then with the chips, with this apple, and into the lunch sack. All of that's got to be moved. So that's logistics as well. If we want to return something or recycle it, I know you all know how to recycle something, but if you think about Apple taking your iPhone back, they take some of the things that are returned within that iPhone and they're able to refurbish those components and reuse them or recycle them. And then how everything is going to be stored along the way. So we're going to move to slide 6. And we're going to talk about the fact that things do not have value to a customer unless they're where the customer needs to consume them, so to the point of consumption. So time utility, this is on your test, means that things are delivered at the right time. Place utility means that they're delivered at the right location. So if you remember back when we had Hurricane Harvey a couple of years ago, there could have been hundreds of thousands of bottles of water in Seattle, Washington. That did not help us. So there was no place utility for people in Houston for that water. Even though it existed, it was not available to us because it was not in the right place. So this is a definition from the Council on Supply Chain Management Professionals. We've used their definitions for lots of things this semester. So this will show you the process of planning, implementing, controlling procedures for the efficient and effective transportation and storage of goods, including services, and related information from the point of origin to the point of consumption for the purpose of conforming to customer requirements. So basically, let's get a plan and let's do the plan and get everything that we need and all the paperwork that needs to go with it to the right consumer at the right time in the right place. So slide 8, The objective of transportation is to make sure that we get either the good or the service provided effectively and to make sure that the customer is happy. So if I tell you that I can cut your hair, but I live in Chicago, that's not very helpful to you. So to make sure that we have everything in the right place and satisfying the customer's requirements. So you can read these definitions. They are on your test on chapter 9, slide 9, but common carriers and contract carriers. So contract carriers are generally trucks that you would see that are owned by the company that has contracted them. So a contract carrier like Walmart, Cisco Foods, Federal Express, UPS, they have their own fleet of trucks. Common carriers are people like Yellow Freight or Old Dominion Freight, and they will do transportation for you for a fee. So UPS kind of falls into both, or FedEx falls into both, in that for themselves, they're a contract carrier, and for other people, they're a common carrier. Exempt carriers do not have to pay some of the taxes and tariffs that other people have to pay, and this is on slide 10. Generally, they're transporting specific types of cargo. And then private carriers are usually owned. They're not as regulated, and they're only transferring goods for the person that owns that carrier, owns that truck. So modes of transportation on slide 11, you can look at motor carriers. LTL is on your test. That stands for less than truckload. And if you can imagine a long 18-wheeler, maybe you only have 20 pallets. That'll fill about half. So that's what LTL means. And it's generally more expensive if you do not fill the entire truck than if you do fill the entire truck. General freight carriers I did not put on the test, and specialized carriers I did not either. But if you think about trucks that carry things like fuel or tanker trucks, things like that, liquid nitrogen, those kinds of things, that's generally specialized carrier. You've all seen rail carriers on slide 12, the railroad, and then trailer on flat car. I didn't put that on your test, but you will see TOFC sometimes in a logistics environment where you're trying to choose the right one. You all know, obviously, things also transport a lot of times on slide 14 by air. It's very expensive, but it's fast. So you can have it slow by a ship, or you can have it fast by a plane. You can have it kind of in the middle on a truck or rail. Many times, and you'll learn this in your exports course, but many times it's a combination of these. Because if you think about something coming by sea, might land in the port in Houston, but if it's going to Dallas, it's going to have to go some other method between Houston and Dallas. So water carriers on slide 15, inexpensive, but they're slow and they're inflexible. They're going from point A to point B, and then it's your responsibility to get them once they've arrived at the port in place B to get it the rest of the way. But they definitely are less expensive and they're slow. Pipeline carriers are things, that's how we transport natural gas and oil and things like that. So you can read about that. I didn't put that on your exam. Intermodal is what we were just talking about. So you're going to ship something maybe by air. It's going to land in Houston, and then it's going to be trucked to College Station, or it's going to be trucked to Galveston or something like that. So we'll talk about how these are priced on slide 18. Cost of service pricing basically says it's going to vary depending on the price of fuel, how far you're going, all those kinds of things. Value of service pricing basically says, oh, you want us to go get it, clear it at the port, sign all the paperwork, and bring it straight to your office. They'll do that, but that's because they're adding all those additional services, it's going to be a competitive market, and whatever the market will bear is what the price will be. You've learned about FOB in your exports course, I'm assuming, so I will skip over that. I didn't put any of these on your test, but you just should know that there's a lot of different ways that transportation is priced. I didn't put any of this on your test, but you should know that that fourth one down, they call that the TWIC, the Transportation Worker Identification Credential. If you work anywhere like an airport or a port or anything like that, you have to have this, and it's fingerprints and it's all those kinds of identifying things, and it's to protect Homeland Security. We'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of regulation and deregulation. I put this on your chapter question homework, so we don't have to discuss it a lot here. You'll read about it in the book and you'll be able to answer the questions. The only thing that I did put on the test, I believe, is the Granger Laws, which is the very first regulation that was enacted in the United States in 1870 to begin to regulate the railroads. That was the very first time that there was any kind of federal government intervention into transportation. I also put the Reed Bullwinkle on the test, so you can have a look at that as well. You can read about these in the book. So go to slide number 26. You should understand about cross-docking. So if I receive something in a quantity of 100, I break it down into 10 packages of 10 each. I repackage those and then I send those out. That is something that a distribution center would do. So if I'm selling to that distribution center, the advantage for me is I can send one big pallet of 100 of something, and that's less expensive for me. The profit for the distribution center comes in the fact that they buy that, they add a little bit of value by breaking it down and repackaging it into a smaller quantity, and then they're able to make a profit because they can charge more for that package of 10 than what they paid when they bought it as a package of 100. I didn't put any of this on your test. A cold chain, you should know, is just the way that food or anything else that's perishable, flowers, things like that, have to be transferred through the supply chain. They have to be kept cold so that they don't spoil. You can read about private warehouses. You can read about public warehouses. Break bulk is what I just discussed with you. That's the term for taking something in a package of 100, breaking it down into 10 smaller packages, 20 smaller packages, wherever it may be, and then shipping those out to fulfill customer orders. There is a definite question on your test about risk pooling. You don't need to understand the math of this. Again, this is something that would be done by a piece of software that you would have in your business, but you need to understand what risk pooling is. Risk pooling is a way to decide by the square root rule, which is right here on slide 31, but it's a way to help you figure out where you should place things in a warehouse based on the least risky location. And that's what this is about. Let's see what else I gave you on slide 33 and 34. I didn't put any of that on your test. So on slide 35, we talked about lean in chapter 8. So you would imagine that lean warehousing would be exactly like lean manufacturing, and it is. It's having no waste. It's an emphasis on cross-docking, which is that break bulk. It's an emphasis on automation so that there's fewer mistakes because things are being done by either a robot or they're being picked automatically by some kind of a pallet retrieval system and things like that. And it tends to be green because it's generally much more automated, less paperwork, that kind of thing. So you'll hear a term on slide 36 called 3PL. So I want to always teach you how to say things correctly. So 3PL. You'll also hear the term 4PL, which has come newer than this book. This book is about 5 years old. So 3PL is third-party logistics. And you'll see lots of companies that do 3PL services for large companies. Excel Logistics is one of them. There are many, but what they do is they say, we'll do all your logistics for us. You put all of your stuff in the warehouse. You tell us when something needs to ship to your customer. We'll be responsible for picking it, packing it, shipping it, and then sending you whatever you need electronically so you can invoice. 4PL is one additional step where they often will take the order themselves and provide the invoicing directly to the customer. You'll see that at the bottom of the slide. So other intermediaries, you probably learned about these on slide 38 in your import-export class, but freight forwarders, shippers associations, intermodal marketing companies, there's all kinds of other services that you can get in the logistics and supply chain field. So on slide 39, we have to have the environment in this book, you know that. So one of the things that sustainability in logistics is that we don't want to have empty miles. So if you think about the fact that that truck is going to have a certain amount of carbon emissions, it's going to consume a certain amount of fuel, and pollution, et cetera, is going to be the same regardless of whether it's full or empty. So the gas mileage may vary some if it's full or empty, but we don't want a truck making empty miles if we don't have to. So it's part of a logistics program is saying, I'm going to ship this from Houston to Kansas City. I want to try to find something that's coming now from Kansas City back to Houston so I don't have those empty miles. So there are Coalition for Responsible Transportation is one of the non-government organizations that does a lot of work on making sure that they help people get those clean truck programs put in place and that they reduce the number of empty miles as much as possible. It also is more profitable for the trucking company not to have because they're going to make the trip from Houston to Kansas City to deliver that first shipment. If they can also bill for something shipping from Kansas City back to Houston, obviously they're making money on both legs, and that's what they'd want to do. Much like if you think about an Uber driver or a Lyft driver or something like that. TMS is something that you'll hear people talk about. That's a transportation management system. It's kind of like an MRP, but it is something that generally would plug into your MRP or your ERP, and it's going to give you information about where your shipments are, what needs to ship that day, maybe things like this shipment can't go to this country because it's illegal, or it has to be packaged a certain way, it has to be labeled a certain way, there have to be origin information on each package, things like that. WMS is the warehouse management system, so making sure that you keep your labor costs in the warehouse as low as possible, making sure that you're storing things that in a logical place, allowing you to pick them and get them out to customers quickly, making sure that you don't accept things that you don't actually have a place to store because you're at capacity, getting that paperwork down, and then helping you figure out how to manage the cross-docking process. So if you're going to bring something in and have to break it down, that you know where it is, you know that it's in the right quantities to break it down, and you're able to interpret that this one pallet of 100 is actually equal to 10 customer orders or whatever the case may be. GTM is something that you'll hear occasionally. Global Trade Management Systems. That's definitely something that's coming up more because people want to know where their goods are. As we've talked about, the Amazon effect of people saying, "Where's my stuff?" They always want to know where it is. And then reducing reverse logistics, which is the cost of getting things returned. I didn't put any of this on your test. So this second bullet that talks about right shoring. Right shoring basically says some things should be done domestically, some things should be done by an offshore partner, and some things should be done maybe by a different kind of a partner. And right shoring is making that decision to decide where things should be taken care of. I did put this on your test, so you should know that a foreign trade zone, an FTZ, what that's for. FTZs allow you to store things for export, or if you're going to bring something into the country, do some value add assembly to it, and then package it and send it right back out. It keeps you from having to pay taxes both in and out. You can just bring it into this free trade zone, make your change, and then the tariff is mitigated some by the fact that you've done it in this free trade zone. So the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, this is being redone right now. This is very close to being renegotiated between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, but you just should know that the purpose of NAFTA was to remove trade barriers between our three countries. I did not give you much on reverse logistics on the exam. Of course, there has to be a green reverse logistics slide. So we'll talk about how the environmental impact of those things, keeping things out of landfills, making sure that we're dealing with things that are dangerous, like recycling batteries and things like that, that those are taken care of. So that's the end of chapter 9. That will cover the test for you. Good luck, and please work through your study guide, making sure that you know the answers to those questions, and the test will be given over chapters 7, 8, and 9. And if you have any questions, you know how to contact me.